Welcome to the OnScript podcast, your home for world-class conversations on scripture and theology, where you get to meet some of the best in the field. Visit us at onscript.study. Say hello on Twitter at OnScriptPodcast and stop by our Facebook page at facebook.com/OnScript.
Hey everybody, welcome back to OnScript. Returning once again is Professor Irvine Sheblazm, who's become a kind of annual spring fixture on the podcast. He's a theologian and a scientist, among other things, who runs the Center for Excellence in the Lake District in the UK. And I understand that he's also planning to open more centers for excellence, not only in other parts of the world, which is in the works, as he put it, but also in each and every mind. And I find that idea so compelling, the idea that each of us can become a center of and for excellence, of course, guided by your books, Dr. Sheblazm. And they've been a real guide, sort of mentor to a lot of us, including among your books are The Cheerful Taker, New Economics for Pauline Christians in a Changing World, Abraham's Bosom, Paul and the Decline of Postmodernism, Child Rearing with the Apostle Paul in the Book of Revelation. But he's here to discuss his latest book, The Emotionally Healthy Paul, Inner Emotional Intelligence with the Apostle Paul. As always, listeners, buckle up. Professor Sheblazm, welcome back.
Hello. Hello, America. Hello, Canada. Hello, everybody else. Dr. Sheblazm is on the podcast. It's good to be back. Emotionally, physically, interiorly, it's great to be back. Back again. Look who's back.
Yeah, it's great to have you, as you've put it. Now, before we get to the book, you mentioned, when we were talking before we hit record, that this topic has become quite personal for you. This is a topic of emotional health. So why don't you riff on that?
Absolutely, and thank you. Emotional stuff, it's a balance of two things. Transparency, that's key. Vulnerability, that's key. To be vulnerable is to be. If we were to merge transparency and vulnerability, what do you get, Matthew? Let's do some wordplay.
Like vulnsperity or something, some word that's the hybrid of that.
No, not at all. So we're looking at transluce RRC. Transluce RRC.
Oh, that's rich. So I don't, some of our listeners might not fully get what that means.
Okay. I try and broaden your horizons for better listeners, but let's go for it. Let's make sure everyone's clear. We're all on the same page. I assume your listeners know what transparent means. To be vulnerable, you need to have things flow out from you. So one should allow feelings to be released like a sluice gate. Therefore, transluce aparacy. Transluce aparacy. Depth is also key.
Right.
I think we're going to talk a bit more about emotional health. We must begin where all good theology begins on this journey. That's with me.
Yeah, talk more about that.
I've approached this year in a way of trying to establish relative balance, both personally, physically, mentally, emotionally, virtually, all bases covered. There is an ongoing current legal issue.
Okay.
Lee said the better. Oh, and Dave.
Like Dave is the legal issue or separate from it?
Technically, yes. Spiritually, no.
Right. Okay.
My journey right now has led me to have to enter into being an emotionally health practitioner by necessity.
Oh, so what happened that precipitated that?
Well, this is really kind of the genesis of the book. Dave said to me, and I'm paraphrasing, though emotionally speaking, I have kept the exact tone in my mind. He said, something's really wrong with you. You need to process your feelings. Now, my first thought was, excellent. At last, someone has recognized the scale of my complex interior life. So I thought, right, process, like a factory, like a sweet factory, like a violin factory, like an egg factory. Feelings come in, they get processed, come out better. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's a really helpful image. So what did you do then on the basis of that metaphor?
Within moments of that metaphor coming to mind, flew out, down the local shops, got myself a shredder.
That's a shredder. That's surprising.
Yeah, so I got a nice industrial shredder, crosscut. Has water in the bottom, little water reservoir. So when the crosscut comes down, it falls down, gets mixed with the water. No way you're bringing that back. No one's going to read your shreddings.
Now, what are you shredding there? Like, is this still the metaphor for like shredding your feelings, or what's the purpose?
We're moving from a metaphor to a practical for, where it's real. So yeah, exactly. Wrote down a feeling. So, for example, wrote down anger, betrayal, resentment, mild outrage, major outrage, confusion, injustice, Dave.
So Dave got his own card.
Multiple cards. I was there for a good 5 minutes just shredding Dave. Yeah. The problem was, and this is why emotional health is complicated, Dave saw this and said, that's not processing, which I think is unfair because that's literally what it was.
Yeah, well, mechanically speaking, you were processing Dave and what he said. So how did that, I mean, that obviously was a very, very formative experience. Important. We all have those moments similar to that, maybe not the exact same, but all of us have something analogous. But not all of us will then write a book. But for you, and this is okay. So this is the thing that sets you apart in many ways, is your ability to kind of put those ideas down in writing. So how did that lead you to your book, the Shredder incident?
There are what I would describe as amateur scholars, and then there's probably like yourself, someone who earns an average income from scholarly activity, and then some of us just peak above. And I think for a true scholar like myself, in a moment of crisis, very simple: who in Scripture models inner emotional intelligence at the highest level? And the answer was obvious, Matt.
Jesus.
Who? No. Paul, the man who wrote all the letters. You cannot write that many letters without being emotionally healthy. Obvious.
I think some people wonder if how much we can really know about Paul's emotional life.
No, no. If you've spent enough time as I have with Paul, only if you really listen to the emotional grain of his texts, I think Paul wants us to go through an emotional roller coaster. I think he's emotionally complex, and I don't think he arrives at that by accident. Right, here's an example. Here's a good theological, anthropological example. After all he did, after all those letters, right, if I was going to, right, for me, every time I write anything down, I publish a book, right? Why did he not bother putting all the letters he wrote in the Bible? Why is he, it's like an anti-spoiler. He starts for example, I think it's 1 Corinthians 5:9. I wrote you in my letter. Well, where's the letter? So you start in a kind of unspoilery way where you're like, oh, well, I don't know what he said. So emotionally, I'm already upset. And then you read his letter and inner peace returns. So I think that to me is the emotional roller coaster. Do you get that?
Yeah, I think it's
good.
I when I was reading that in your book, I just thought, wow, this is like unlocking things, because scholars have often wondered what that other letter said. They've tried to mirror read out of Paul's letters and tried to determine what he said to them, that he's responding to their response and all that. And I think you put it in the book at one point, like that Paul, in this roller coaster, he creates emotional nausea, and that by creating that crisis, then he sort of brings out the things that we need dealing with only to then turn around in the letter and help process them. And you talk in your book then about the ways that you're also doing not just the Pauline analysis, but also empirical research. You're a scientist and a theologian. So tell our listeners about how you've brought the empirical firsthand research into this.
You mean, are you talking about working with animals?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were to think to yourself, where can I hunt and find good examples of emotion and how emotion can affect a living entity? Most people would go to the very nature of God's creation, the pinnacle of God's creation, outside of the Trinity, humans. But I think that's too obvious. I think that's far too obvious. Where does the truth of emotional stability lie? For me, goats. Yeah? Goats seem very happy. Sheep seem happy. Cows seem content. They all seem pretty happy. Isn't that odd? And you know what? No one asks why.
Yeah, do they?
Yeah. Having studied these animals in detail for quite some time, there is what I would describe in the cow a serenity. There is in the sheep a settledness, and the goat, if fed and properly handled and put in a kind of enclosure, I think can process what I would describe as their robust emotional boundaries. Donkeys, are they happy?
What do you think?
Well, think of the donkey that Mary rode, or the camels ridden by the wise men, or the whale that Joshua rode to Nineveh, or the horses even that the Israelis rode out of Egypt. Each of these must have had emotional balance and peace. I just find it fascinating. I'm sure your listeners do too. I mean, if your listeners have not stood in a field and stared at animals for hours on end, they're missing a trick here. Why are goats, sheep, and cows so much happier than people? You ever seen a goat journal? You ever seen a sheep have a wellness podcast in their ears? Ever seen a cow doing breath work? They don't post beige quotes over sunset backgrounds to their friends on Facebook. Yet they appear, broadly speaking, at peace, emotionally tranquil.
Yeah, that's when I did read your discussion of that in the book, and when you said it that way, you kind of lay it all out. You lay out the evidence that you have from analyzing the animals and reading scripture, and it just I have to say personally, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And
Oh no, you carry on.
No.
I'm sure what you've got to say is really, really inspirational. So carry on.
And I thought of the proverb, like, go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways. And I had always taken that as like hard work. But one of the things you point out in the book is that it's about the ant's emotional intelligence and self-awareness. And I had never put that together with all the other pieces. But then when you lay them all out side by side, you see those lines of connection between them that runs right, so to speak, into the field and through the woods of the world we inhabit.
Matt, it brings me so much joy when avid fans of my work, like yourself, are able to draw these nuggets out. I mean, I think for me, it's that what comes to mind is the mother bird returning to the nest, and the chicks underneath with their beaks open, and I'm passing up through my own beak that substance of stuff that they collect around, and I'm just depositing it, boom, straight into your mouth. I think that to me is it just brings me so much joy. I'm actually tearing up. Sorry, I didn't think that would. Talking about emotions, it just gets to me. So my discovery, going back to
so what did you conclude about all this?
It is simply that. Well, I found an old book, and in it was from like Norfolk or somewhere out in the sticks in England. That's like I don't know, Montana or something for you. There was monks made old Bibles, didn't they? And they used to draw pictures.
Sure.
Yeah. And so in those pictures were animals. And I thought, is that not a reflection of themselves? I think the animals are actually monks. Animals, these animals, particularly the cow, they live holy lives. They're all like monks. They eat, check. They walk, check. They do not speak, check. Therefore, surely amongst life existence, are they closer to the Lord than others?
Yeah, I think you've got a point there, and again, not where I would have gone, but when you bring me there,
There you go.
I'm with you, and I found it convicting actually.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So let's get to Paul. Not to leave the animals, we're going to bring them with us. Bring them with us into the study of Paul.
Amen.
Because one of the things you also point out is that Paul must have spent a lot of time with animals. So why do you think Paul was emotionally healthy? What can we learn from him? What are some of the reasons he was healthy?
Well, when you look at Paul, all the things he did, all the things he got up to, it's clear, crystal clear, that he was full of discipline. He traveled constantly. He must have exercised 3 times a day. Legs on one day, back on another. Follow proper good routine.
Yeah, must have. I mean, how do you?
Well, I think you've got to like in an anthropological way, you've got to look into what you think, what would have made it work for him. So for me, it's things. I mean, it's obvious. Core work. Yeah, he must have exercised and done core work to build, because all that walking.
Right.
You don't see Paul using boats or other transport devices. And let's be clear, nobody walks for fun. You hate it, Matthew, I imagine. I definitely hate it. But all of our listeners hate walking. So possibly I think he would have had some kind of primitive resistance band, maybe probably like a vine, because obviously that's linking directly back to Jesus, who's the vine. Tension is tension in some form. I think a vine you can probably get a good bit of tension out of. So that's the first thing. Discipline with tension. Second, solitude.
Right.
I think some people would say that was his time in prison, but I like to say solitude.
Yeah, I was really touched by that part of the book, and again convicted. And it changed the way I thought about Paul's prison experience, and I think it changes it for all of us to reframe how we look at this place from which he's writing these epistles. Bring us in there, bring us into that prison.
I think any time you look at anything, you should use a lens. And so if we look at his time in prison, I want to say that's an opportunity rather than a kind of something thrust upon him. Today, get this, think about this, absorb this. People pay money to go on retreats when no one can contact them, and they eat soup in silence. Paul embraced that for free. And that's probably why I imagine he kept going there. It was his retreat center before it was cool, so to speak.
Yeah.
Paul must have been there for some me time.
So insightful.
Humble. I think we can all agree Paul is humble.
Yeah.
Doesn't put his views out there. Clearly is open to suggestion of stuff. Easy to sort of work with. For a start, the letters are all about talking to others, taking their thoughts. Paul, to me, seems to be an easy, laid-back kind of guy. He has no notifications, no Instagram, no scrolling, no TikTok, as they call it, which in itself is stressful because it sounds like time is running out. Paul didn't have that. He had parchment, prayer, and probably a fairly clean Mediterranean diet, and walking. I mean, Matt, he must have done he must have walked for like 20, 30 miles on his journey around the Middle East and the Mediterranean and stuff. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
I sometimes get out of breath. Walking up the stairs.
Right.
So for him to be able to walk like 20 miles and keep going, it's shocking. It's just
and if you translate that into kilometers, we're talking even more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you did 20 miles and he did like whatever it is, 30 kilometers, then that's even more.
Now, some listeners, the skeptics out there might push back and say, "Hey, you're sort of assuming some things about Paul and his exercise regimen and how he viewed prison and his diet and so on." You've got some assumptions in there.
Get away from me, foul demon. That's what I say to people who critique. These aren't assumptions. Assumptions are what normal people have, Matt. People like you, me, other well-known scholars, we have scholarly assumptions. Whole different kettle of fish.
Now, one of the other things you learned from Paul, you talk about in the book, and this is going to be new territory for a lot of people, even those who are into like Ignatian prayer practices and stuff, is what you call Pauline breath work. So what is it that constitutes Pauline breath work?
What is Pauline breath work, you ask? Very simple. And this is one of the nuggets. I mean, I'm not one to sort of weigh in on my own impact on other people, but I think this one is, again, a nugget. To sum up Pauline breathwork, very simple, very straightforward. Even your listeners will get this. You breathe in grace and you breathe out flesh.
Wow. So breathe in grace, breathe out flesh. Has that been good for you?
Oh, yeah. Awkward. Well, yeah. So when you discover a nugget, if you went into a popular restaurant, chain of restaurants, and bought yourself 6 nuggets, what'd you do with those nuggets, Matt?
Eat them.
Well, you might, because you're maybe not like me. You're maybe a bit more selfish than me, but I would share them. So when I have a nugget, I share them. So Pauline breathwork needs to be taken to the masses. So we had a church weekend away, and I suggested that I would do a session on Pauline breathwork. It took some time to convince, but they let me have a go. I'm at the front doing breathwork. One woman said I was breathing too aggressively near her homemade biscuits. Now, I was doing Pauline breathwork, therefore this wasn't an emotional trigger for me. But I did think she needed to understand what my emotional state could have been. And so at that moment, I licked all of the biscuits, every single one, so that she felt an emotional state that I may have felt, because I was in an emotional good state, therefore, but she needed to experience that. She then said...
You wanted her to feel what you could have felt but didn't.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then I said, and I quote, "You're not even a real scholar." Now, for most people, particularly for someone like you, Matt, being accused of not being a real scholar must be very difficult. For me, because I was emotionally balanced, I didn't mind. But I did think, wow, there is an opportunity here for some scientific thought related response. So I, through my balanced emotional state, said, I gently referred to her as a grumpy cow, and that her homemade biscuits were actually bought from a shop. The cow reference, of course, is because she'd lost her serenity. So that was a play on words about the state of a cow.
Right. Yeah.
At that point, she ran off screaming, and she obviously needed some Pauline breathing. Maybe she should have stayed and listened to the talk.
It's interesting sometimes that the people that need the insight the most are the ones that run away.
How am I going to write that down, Matt? Right, run away. Great. She ran off screaming. Several days later, I got a court summons for libel. I assumed around the biscuits. So anyway, off we go to court. Now, obviously, the events of that day had to be replayed in court. So my emotional intelligence reservoir, as I like to call it, ran dry during that court proceedings. And my emotional balance, internal emotional balance, became ever so slightly unbalanced. And so I felt this needed to be sorted. So I felt that me and this lady probably needed to have some kind of Victorian style duel or something. So I picked up the biscuits, because that was the nearest thing to me, and thought I'd slam them down gently on the floor to sort of challenge her to take her outside, and we have a verbal duel.
Right, because the biscuits were there as material evidence in court.
Yes, exactly. So I thought, let's get outside, let's use our brains rather than our words. And unfortunately, the plate slipped out of my hand and flew out and hit the judge smack in the face. So that the kind of the libel thing got Paul.
Well, I hope he understood that and understood it was a mistake.
I mean, I explained in detail, and I even tried to teach him Paulinal breathing, but it seemed to not work as I thought it would. So he then read out a list of things that I now face: contempt of court, repurposing an item of confectionery into a biodegradable weapon, failure to maintain custody of biscuits in proximity to a judge, and inappropriate kinetic use of a consumable goods. I mean, I'm appealing it, as you can imagine. I just part of me,
and the other thing is like, why should you suffer for her emotional imbalance and also the judge's lack of emotional intelligence? I mean, it's like they needed your book prior to all of this happening.
Maybe I should have thrown the book at him to get, because that's I have a book and it's an expression of
legal metaphor.
It's a legal metaphor. Anyway, all a misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna appeal, but do you know what always happens? You know who I go to in these moments?
Who?
Church fathers. Okay. I was researching church fathers and I found a quote that just, I cannot express to you how much this resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't find out. All good scholars should footnote, their work. Can't quite pin down who said this, but this is it. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never going to keep me down. And then you have to repeat it. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never going to keep me down.
Those sound like Chummywumba's words.
Oh, really? I don't know. Church father or something. I'll write that down. Chumbawamba.
No. Yeah.
Great. I'll look that up. That's a great lead.
So you also say in the book that crucial to any relationship is knowing which to keep and which to shed, and how Paul, part of his emotional health is knowing which and when, which relationships to shed and when.
Oh, yeah. Like a dog shedding a fur. I think Paul shed away. I think this is, for me, is one of Paul's greatest gifts to the modern world. Boundaries.
Yeah.
A modern person would say, I need to protect my peace. Paul says, hand this man over to Satan. That, to me, is a guy who has healthy boundaries. He knew what was needed in that situation.
Yeah, that's one way to establish a boundary. Yeah, so you're talking about 1 Corinthians, and some people might see that as a toxic way to handle relationships. What would you say?
This is not, to me, toxicity, Matthew. It's clarity.
Yeah, I don't know if a lot of therapists would use that word.
This, I'm just going to breathe. Therapists, because they are afraid of being precise, therapists don't give you the answers you need.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems in our postmodernistic age is the fear of precision. It's actually one of the root causes of youth antisocial behavior. They don't want to be precise, so instead they make noise on the bus. They play ding dang ditch at my door, and worse, they're loud. They play football in public spaces.
Yeah.
What Paul knew is that precision is an essential and proper, civilized, quiet youth and children is what the precision gives you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think there's, as you talk about in the book, a real fear of being precise, of given that hard word, and Paul has a lot to teach us. So speaking of triggers, you say that in one chapter, Paul knew what emotionally triggered him. I thought, wow. And then I thought, what do you mean?
Paul had triggers. He had triggers. I would be, it's crystal clear he had triggers on false teaching, disorder, young people making noise, bad eschatology, table manners, I think is a clear one. People not understanding him properly, which, if I may say so, I find deeply relatable.
So what makes Paul emotionally healthy then, with regard to triggers?
I think what made Paul emotionally healthy is not that he had no triggers. That would be impossible. It is that he knew them, named them, and wrote at length to other people about them. Sorry, just to be clear, when I say name them, I don't mean like that emotion's Peter and that emotion's David and that emotion's Chris. It's that he spoke them out. He opened his sluice gate, not waste for water. So he opened his clean water sluice gate, and out came. Sorry, hold on one second. Shut up! So yeah, inner peace is important. Shush!
So good. So I'd like to talk, and I know this is sensitive, come back around to Dave for a moment. You talk about him in the book, so I'm going to bring it up. How much can you share? I don't want to push you too hard on that, but I know you're emotionally robust. Yeah, just for listeners, Dave is Dr. Sheblazm's longtime assistant at the Center for Excellence. He's been working there since the beginning. Yeah.
He feeds the goats. He sometimes dresses a goat, things like that. He does a varying degree of things for me. So, yeah. So he said, and I quote, "Not every thought needs to become a system. Normal people, that would have hurt. And sometimes I feel I might just be under all of this under all my scholarly, theological, anthropological layers, that hurt just a little bit. In fact, it hurt a little bit deeply. Firstly, it was dismissive. Secondly, it was wrong. Thirdly, it became chapter 4, actually, of the book. Sometimes the wound is the window. And sometimes transparency are the shutters. So I think it's fine for putting Dave in the public domain. Dave's been a decades-long employee of mine. Yeah. And I'm not about to have my investment in him flourishing backfire due to a thoughtless comment. Right. So, I mean, what do you do in these scenarios? And you grow from it. So I did two things. Firstly, I docked his pay for 2 months. It wasn't in any way a money thing for me, but it was a life lesson thing. Secondly, I treated myself with the savings I'd made on his salary to a wellness retreat. What would Paul do? He'd go to Solitude. I went to Solitude in the south of France at a really quite nice spa, which had one of those infinity pools. It was really, really nice. So
and you're liking that in the book to what Paul did in going to prison. So that yours.
I mean, the only difference is, I think there was huge parallels, but there was a really nice waiter who would always come and ask you for cocktails and stuff. And I think I didn't want to say to him, "Don't disturb me. I need to be in complete solitude." So I was like, I let him talk to me and bring me drinks, because I think that. So that enabled me to hit the reset button, both on myself and then to come back even stronger. I think Dave would say he may have come back a bit weaker and I came back stronger, but here's the thing. We both learned something.
Yeah. And isn't that what all of us want anyway? So I think that's that sounds really impactful on both of you to go through that together. Thank you for sharing that. Well, Professor Sheblazm, thank you so much for joining us on Script and talking to us about your new book. Again, the title is The Emotionally Healthy Paul: Inner Emotional Intelligence with the Apostle Paul. And this has been an emotionally rich journey, I think, for all of us. So thank you so much for your work and what you've done.
No, I'm here to serve. I am but a humble servant to the theological world. Yeah. And if I must say one thing to your listeners, I've gone to the restaurant that shall not be named. I've got myself some nuggets. Here's one free for all of you. Yeah. Do not suppress what you feel. Refine it, name it, theologicalize it, and if possible, monetize it.
Well, on that note, we're going to bring this to an end. Thank you so much, Dr. Sheblazm, on behalf of our listeners.
Thank you, listeners.
Yeah, thank you.
You've been listening to On Script, delectable conversations on scripture and theology. If this episode has brought you inner peace or lit your biblical fire, please consider a small donation of just $2 or $5 per month. Information on how to donate can be found at onscript.study/donate.